we were delighted that Graciela Ainsworth, we went out to tender for the Pictish stone, the work on the Pictish stone. I was so glad that Graciela Ainsworth was able to do it. I have to say, she tells a scary story. At least it's a story for me, a scary story for me. But over to you, Graciela.
Thank you very much, Roland. Not just is this incredible to be invited to speak today, but also this is the first time I've done a presentation, so I hope everybody bears with me too. But thank you very, very much for inviting me to talk about my company's work to conserve this incredibly important stone following Anne's find. That video was really amazing. Do I start my video now? Do I share my screen?
Just go ahead.
Thank you very much.
That's fine, Graciela, we can see it.
You can see it. Okay. So I'll just go straight in and hope I don't scare too many people. Hope it's not too scary, Roland. So what I'd like you to do is just a tiny background on who we are. We're a small, it's not just myself, obviously. We're a small team of sculpture conservators. There's 9 of us. And we've got a workshop based in Leith in Edinburgh. And we carry out amazingly varied projects. The most wonderful objects arrive, sculptures very small to building facades, come into our hands. And with those, each one, it's so important to have the greatest respect for every single one, because every single one has so much to learn for us. And we're learning something new every step of the way. And what we need to do as conservators is question. Before we do anything, we have to question every single move that we make. And that's by learning from the object. Because we've got to be respectful in that we're only the tiniest part in, and also hopefully not visible part in the long history of each object, to enable the object to survive into the future. So this project started in August 2019, and there was many conversations, as we've heard already, between ourselves and Kirsty Cameron and Roland. And that was all conversations. And it wasn't until we got this map, very small map, indicating this long path that we'd walk along to carry out the beginning of our work, which is to work out how to manhandle and lift this stone very carefully out of the ground. Jonathan and Will, who you can see here from our team, were pulling our bogie, carrying all our lifting equipment along the 250-meter uneven path to find this absolutely wonderful stone, lying proudly awaiting our lift. And it was obviously following all the really hard work everybody had carried out to have it sitting there in state, waiting for us to maneuver our slings very gently and tentatively underneath it. The stone we found was 1 meter, 690 millimeters in length, 640 wide, and 195 deep, which then, as you can see, one of the large elements of the immediate challenge was that this large piece of stone had an open bedding plane all the way around it. and a smaller one on the top. And you can imagine then, if it's only 195 deep, each layer was just under 100 mil thickness. And another thing, just to remind people, because people really think when they see a piece of stone, always, oh, it's a piece of stone, it's really tough, you can do anything with it. Well, actually, particularly sandstone, which I have a real passion for, they need to be treated like a sheet of glass or like an incredibly important painting. They really need to be treated with that sort of respect, but also the manhandling of it. This Conan stone, upper side and edges visible, lying spread over stones in the ground, enabled us to very carefully lift the stone, probably in a similar manner to as it was lain, I am thinking, so that we could then just slip our modern slings using our more modern alloy, slightly lighter weight gantry, and very carefully lift it with a block and tackle onto our soft wheel bogey, which then enabled, with manpower and woman power, and thanks to all the volunteers on that day, to carefully push the bogey all the back along that track uphill to our vehicle. So there it is, safely back out of the vehicle, still on the bogey. As Roland was saying, that the mason who installed the stone in the museum, we weighed it, and it was pretty well about 400 kilos, because sandstone, dry sandstone, tends to be just over about 2 tons a square meter. Just to give you an idea of the weight of this piece. So this stone arrived at our workshop on the bogey. We then were able to have a really good look at it, and we could see where nature had started to reclaim it, with all the roots poking out of the laminations and bedding planes. And how lucky that it was found at that time, and that nature hadn't reclaimed it more. We then needed to re-erect the gantry to take it off the bogey. So this was carried out. And at this point, of course, we could start to see much more clearly how the bedding planes were moving. Initially, we were asked to do a very light surface clean. And this was to get give us a better assessment of the actual piece of red sandstone. Even in this light, you can see the different surfaces, you can see the fine fissures and weathering, natural weathering of the stone. And of course, this stone has been saturated in the ground for many years. Its eventual display position, of course, is going to be in a dry environment within a museum. So it was extremely important to be, again, this is the respectfulness of the actual piece of stone as well as the beautiful object, is we wanted to see how the actual sandstone reacted. Luckily, we have, I wanted to put in a wee picture of the workshop with some of us working in there. Luckily, we made our workshop this open plan space, which was then really good for this stone. So it would allow it to just dry out slowly, which happened over 4 months. And we could just constantly monitor it and watch it. And it wasn't just us, of course. Dr. Louisa Campbell carried out analysis on the stone to see if she could determine any fine bits of pigment that were remaining in the carving. It was drawn by John Borland, was laser scanned by Colin Muir, both of HES, and of course it was enjoyed by many more, including a group from NoSAS. At one point through that time, we laid it down because we had the privilege of Isabel and George Henderson arriving to the workshop with Mark Hall, and it was wonderful to hear them talk so passionately about the carving on both sides. And it was learning, of course, as I mentioned, we question what we do every single moment, but also we're learning from the stone, but we're also wanting to learn as much as possible from all these incredibly knowledgeable people. So as the stone dried out, of course, our work was to start to try and get into these beds and try and remove as much dirt and organic growth as possible. Unfortunately, we found that was a little bit more difficult than we thought it was going to be, which is you know, we as I said, we get challenges every single day, and I thought that was a great picture, just so you can see how roots, which seem so well, so fine, can then sometimes grow to larger trees, and just that those gentle roots moving slowly can open up really heavy weights of stone. And I couldn't resist putting that photograph in. I mean, is that not amazing? Just amazing. I do love, I love sandstone, obviously. I love to carve it myself, but just seeing what nature can actually do is incredible. But also, as importantly, I wanted to show you this image of Sicker Point in Berwickshire, where it's a very important geological area, where you can see horizontal and vertical bedding and sediment in the sandstone, and again, red sandstone. Because, of course, originally when the sandstone was compacted and made, it was horizontal. Eventually, it was used and wonderfully carved and then stood proud vertically. Then, through whatever reason, it then lay in the ground horizontal again. And finally, its new resting place in the museum, again, will be vertical. And this, of course, created incredible challenges, structural ones and health and safety ones for the public. As well as the laminations, there's also the bottom area of the stone, which was where Anne was talking about, was this area of loss. And what we could see was an inclusion or two, very large inclusions actually, which was quite unusual, and but also a lot of disaggregation in the stone. And so we realized at that point we really were going to have to be brave and think of a way of lifting the top section of bedding away from the bottom section, which had already come away naturally over time through the root, because of the roots. So this looks a little scary, and I can assure you it really was. But one of the team, Jonathan, did a lot of research to try and find a piece of equipment that would help us support this top piece of stone, which, as I say, was really vulnerable, to enable us to lift it really safely, slowly, and carefully. And we found this amazing machine, which we tried on something else, tried it on this, and it was perfect because it really supported the whole length of the stone. And as it was slowly lifting, we were watching, and lo and behold, there inside, you could see all the organic matter that had started reclaiming this piece of stone. And there it is in two halves. We've never actually done this before. So it's what we imagined, because we've split stone quite a lot ourselves. The way I would do it these days is using plug and feather. It's still an old technique, but you still use it. But there was no need for plug and feather here. The roots had naturally done it themselves, very, very slowly over time. And not only were there the roots, of course, there was a lot of earth. There was, I'm sure, lots of insects had been through there. And you can see that the roots had gone right through the whole layer. I'm one of those people that collects everything. I mean, the workshop is full of all sorts of old fixings from all the different wonderful objects we work on. And I have to say, I have kept this. If anybody would like the roots that were within the Conan stone, very willing to give them to them. I also have a bag of all the pieces of loose stone and earth that we brushed from the inside, so it can be analysed and used in the future, hopefully. But I just thought I'd just off on a tangent, which I often do, but I will come back. Another form of mastery of nature, there's such a thing as a masonry bee, and they bury into very weak sandstone, and we're facing this problem at Falkland Palace in Fife at the moment. But back to this important, wonderful stone. We cleaned it, as I say, we removed all this rubble, of which is in a bag, waiting if somebody wants it, or I shall keep it. And underneath there, we found possibly one of the reasons why the stone isn't standing, another possible reason. It may be that while the sandstone was being made, it was along the edge of a riverbed, where the grains were much larger, and the binder had to be was obviously weaker in that area, because the grains of sand weren't so fine, and so that's where it was full of inclusions, and that area was a lot weaker than the rest of the sandstone. I don't know, it's a possibility that the whole larger area of the bottom of the stone maybe had this problem and therefore was just naturally weaker over time. But it's another interesting part hidden within Conan stone for us to find. There was also the top section. There was a very small top section that had been recarved, and unfortunately that was moving also. So after much heartache and thinking, how would we deal with this when eventually it was in the vertical position, we realized we had to take that off from the top very carefully. And there, as you see, we found the exact same, all that nature was reclaiming, all the roots and the earth and the loose stone. So that area we locally consolidated, cleaned, locally consolidated with an acrylic copolymer, and reattached with fine, very fine threaded stainless steel fixings. And of course, this was all laser scanned and documented. And back to the larger challenge, and also how incredible that this machine was going to help us throughout the project. There was the big, sorry, that's not the right word. The stones had to be married together, of course, again. And once we'd clean it, it was a really clean layer, and it was perfectly aligned. But we had to fit it together with threaded stainless steel dowels, larger, of course, than the ones on the top surface. To locate those, though, how do you do that, where you've got these two huge stones that you can't just lift easily by hand? So what you do is you put little spots of acrylic paint in the areas that you want to locate your dowels. You then put the top stone back on top like a sandwich. You take the top stone back off again, and the little dots of paint should be on either side of the inside surfaces. We then used a very small diamond core drill to drill the holes, because we didn't want to use normal masonry bits, because we didn't want to create any more unnecessary vibration to the stone. We core drilled all the holes, used very, very slow setting resin. And as you can see, 316 again, stainless steel dowels. And I know it looks like a lot of dowels. It's a perspective of the stone, but also, you know, it needed to be, it's very important that it was structural because it was going vertically in a public space. So following this work, we then filled all the laminations, all the fills with an acrylic copolymer, sand, fine sands and pigments, and textured those to match the surrounding patina of the stone itself. And this is, to some extent, reversible in the majority of very important conservation materials. Conservation work doesn't finish there because this particular stone is going to go on display, and the display and installation was going to be carried out by others and was carried out by others. But what we needed to do was to create an epoxy resin shoe that once the stone was upright, vertical, that the two laminations, that the weight from those there would be no stress on the stone. So what we did was we created this epoxy resin shoe so the stone could sit in it, and the resin shoe takes the stress away. And to do that, you have to do it upside down. So you have to put the stone upside down to do, of course, the shoe, which is how we did it. And also you isolate the resin from the sandstone because you do not want the epoxy hanging onto the sandstone in any way whatsoever. It needs to be separate. So this was carried out upside down and eventually turned the right way.
Graciela, really sorry to interrupt. We're getting towards the end of our time.
Okay, thank you. In fact, I'm nearly finished.
Good.
Thank you, I'm sorry. This slide just shows we also do final reports. We document exactly what we've done, where we've done it, and what we've done it with. This one shows the different fixings that we used, where they were, what they were. And then, although I've put 2001, the stone was left our workshop in the same month, but a year later, in August. This wonderful, wonderful stone that we had such a privilege having in our workshop was transported to site. And thank you so much for listening. I'm sorry I've gone over time there. I hope I've given even a little bit of the passion that we have for this wonderful stone, and thank you very much.
Right. Graciela, it's just amazing to go through that story again and to see the pictures. So for everyone else who's watching that, you can see why I said it's a scary story. Fancy taking a priceless work of art. This is the only Conan stone in the world, and you split it apart. Graciela, there's some questions. Well, first one is about I don't know whether you know, you mentioned that Dr. Campbell came to do some analysis on pigment, whether the stone was painted. Do you know the results of that analysis?
The analysis she carried out at that time, unfortunately, she didn't show any, but she did want to do more. So that's something that obviously can be still carried out on the stone in situ, in fact, even.
Yeah, yeah. Someone, David McGovern, please can I borrow a small sample of the stone to compare to the stone I plan to use for the replica? David McGovern is, as you may remember from the video, carving a new replica stone to go back in the village. Is there have you a small sample of the stone left?
Yeah, I've got all those little bits from inside that were loose. Oh yes, I've got bags Well, it's actually not, it's 2 sample bags, but he's very, very welcome, of course.
Fine. The creator suggests that the root formations be saved and perhaps displayed in Dingwall Museum. After all, they have become part of the stone's history.
Brilliant idea.
Certainly, it would be worth having a video of or a presentation about the handling of the stone in the museum. A question here about who was this from? Hugh Levy. Is it possible to estimate approximately when the stone broke from its base?
I'm sorry, but I mean, maybe a geologist could. I'm sorry, I haven't got that knowledge, certainly, sadly. That would have been wonderful, but sorry, I can't. But maybe a geologist would be able to, maybe.
Yeah, I didn't expect you to answer, but it's an interesting question.
It is.
Whether you can tell from the stone when it came apart.
Well, it was just, it was just really interesting. You know, you would never have seen that different area of formed sandstone if it hadn't come apart. And so, and I think that actually really adds to the, you know, it does add to the story for sure.
A question from me, Graciela, really. Did you have sleepless nights?
Oh, yes, I always do. I mean, I sleep really well, but at the same time, oh no, I mean, I think my team, honestly, they are so incredible. They've known me. I mean, you know, I've been going for 31 years. So many of the team, they've been there, some of them between 16 and 27 years. They've known me. I haven't changed. I worry about everything, but it's because, you know, I mean, I really do honestly really, really care about it. And I see how everybody else really, really cares there. And even a piece of sandstone that isn't carved, I care about, because I know that one piece of stone was made and that's it. That's that one piece is unique without even any carving on it. It's unique. And so, yes, I worry about everything. I worry, that even that I know, yeah, I worry for the, you know, the future of the stone, but that's brilliant, you know, because I think you've got to think positively. The worry means that you are really, really as careful as hopefully you possibly can be. You know, hopefully it makes you really think all the time and remember, you know, and question all the time, which are very important points.
Yeah, my response to that is that it came across that you cared. You weren't just doing a job, but you actually cared about the stone. It was like a creature that you were looking after. There's 2 more comments that I'd like to mention from the other participants. I think they're more comments than real questions for you, Graciela. One is from CL Gamble. I'm an artist who is about to start learning how to electroplate organic matter, potentially a sculpture from the root system in the shape of a human, our shared history. And then
Sounds amazing.
Yeah,
that sounds amazing.
And then Roxanne Reddington Wild says, this is really a question for the archaeologists involved. Were any delaminated remnants of the main slab, sought for or located in the immediate vicinity of the stone itself? Essentially, was there a mini dig around the stone to uncover additional stone fragments and context of its reuse? I don't know if Anne or James would be able to respond to that.
I can actually answer that a wee bit, that there was actually another wee stone that I didn't talk about there, but there was another wee stone that we worked on at the same, with the Conan stone.
That was the cross stone.
The cross stone. Yeah. Was that close to it?
No.
No, it was 25 meters away.
Oh.
At the time of that we did the initial uncovering of the stone in preparation for your workman, for Jonathan and colleague to come and take it away, we did a limited just clearing around the stone and found nothing very exciting.
Uh-huh.
Our time is up. Graciela, thank you so much again for putting that presentation together and for presenting so wonderfully. If that was your first time, you did really well.
Thank you. It was a stone.
It was the stone.